I go, so.
Oh, okay. When you go to the doctor, this is very important. Everybody, you all have pencils and pads. Try to take notes, because this is really important stuff. Number one, when you go to the doctor, have your insurance card with you, and you should know what is on the card and what it means. If you have an insurance card in your pocket or your wallet or your bag right now, take it out. Stuart may talk about a little bit about what some of that stuff means, because some of the questions that you ask are answered over there. When you go to the doctor, be very specific about why you're there. And frankly, a lot of people are embarrassed to bring along lists of stuff. I think it's a good idea, if you have more than one problem, to bring along a list of things you want to talk about. The most frustrating thing for any doctor is to go through seeing a patient, working him up, doing a physical, getting blood tests done, saying goodbye and thank you and whatever else, and then having the patient, by the way, doc, I got a thing over here I want to show you. Well, that is just it's not nice to do, it's time consuming, and it's thoughtless. So bring along a list of everything that you want to talk about and make sure it's covered. Bring a list of all the medications and supplements that you are taking. Carry a list of all your medications in your pocketbook or your wallet or somewhere, and a list in case, God forbid, you're in an accident or anything like that, somebody can look in there and see what medications you're on. The reality is, by looking at a list of medications, we can figure out 90% of the time of what's wrong with you and what you're being treated for. Know what shots you have had. Know when you had pneumonia shot, when you had your flu shots, when you had your tetanus shots, and all of those other things. They may be very significant things to know. And again, you should really keep a record of that along with the medication stuff. Be prepared to ask the doctor when he tells you to get any particular test, why are you doing this test? Do I really need it? And what if it shows something that I'm not expecting? One of the things that Mark did not talk about is what we call the incidental oma, which is something you find when you do a CAT scan looking for a kidney stone. You may find a little thing like this in the kidney, a cyst or whatever. And the radiologist will inevitably tell you, repeat the study in 6 months to see if it's growing. That's how they amortize their machines, besides doing other unnecessary tests. So make sure you ask the doctor why you're having the test and how it's going to help you and not him or his insurance company. Ask him, when should I call back about my tests and when? Or if the doctor does emails, which I personally don't like to do because it will be too much, ask him when he can get this information to you. Don't call him if he says to you, today's Monday, if he says to you, call me on Thursday, don't call him on Wednesday. He's not going to have those results, or he's not going to want to talk to you at that time. You should ask the doctor, do I need any referrals? Who would you like me to see? And can you tell me something about him? People look things up online right now, whatever that means. Not everybody gets 5 stars for everything. Ask the doctor if you need any referrals. Ask him when you should be my next appointment. Yes, Mark?
Just one handy suggestion along the lines of what you said. So many people nowadays have smartphones. Keeping a list of your medications and the various doctors whom you've seen would save tremendous amounts of time in case of emergencies. If there's anything abnormal about you, if you have an abnormal cardiogram, a normal X-ray, prior surgery, keeping something along that in a little folder on your iPhone or smartphone goes tremendous miles.
Some people like me have smartphones that have codes to get into, and you can't use them that way. That's a problem. But it's a good idea. Make sure that when you go to see another doctor, anybody, whether you go on your own or you have a referral, make sure that that doctor sends something to your primary care physician about what he found. He may be sending your primary care physician 5 pages of garbage. He may be sending a very concise note, but you have to have an idea of what's been going on elsewhere. I see people all the time who come in, and I went to see this one, I went to see that one, I went to see that one. What did they tell you? I forgot. I have no idea of what on earth. And take notes. Don't be embarrassed to take notes. If you get a blood test or an X-ray, don't be embarrassed to ask for a copy. Now, if these blood tests come back and some things are redlined or underlined or whatever as being abnormal, that are like, if a normal thing is from 21 to 35 and it comes back 20 or 36, it gets highlighted. If the doctor says it's okay, trust him and believe him, it's okay. Don't start asking him, why is it 1 point off? Because you're not going to get an answer motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Those are things that are very important to do, and don't be embarrassed to do it. It will, in the long run, save you time and save your doctor time. Now, before Stuart talks about where insurance is going, I'm going to talk about where medicine is going. In the old days, you went to see your doctor, you had 1 or 2 complaints, you said it to him. He looked at you, examined you, he said, maybe I'll get a blood test that would be either a blood sugar or a complete blood count or a kidney test. Nothing else was available, basically. Who did cholesterols in those days? And what would happen? You get treated and you go. And that was the end of that encounter. Nowadays, you know what goes on. What's going to happen in the future? What's happening now in some practices? You're going to make an appointment with the doctor, and the first person to see you is going to, other than the receptionist, is going to be a physician's assistant, or in some cases, a 3rd or 4th year medical student, if you go to see a big professor, or a nurse practitioner, and they will take the history from you, and they will do some kind of exam for you. This is particularly happening now these days in single complaint practices like orthopedics and dermatology. The doctor will then make, that person will go see the doctor and in 2 minutes or so describe what information he or she's gotten. The doctor will come to see you, spend 3 minutes with you. He may or may not, or she may not, put a stethoscope on you, or touch your hand, or say hello, or say goodbye, or anything like that. And they'll walk out, and the PA and the nurse practitioner, or the whoever, is going to tell you what should be done, how to do it, make out the request for your x-rays, your MRIs, everything like that. Maybe even make out the prescriptions. What's the doctor doing all this time? He is sitting there writing a very elaborate note on his computer so that he can upcode you into a level 5 visit rather than a level 2 or 3 visit. And these notes come back. That's why you get 5 pages sometimes when the doctor has barely ever seen the patient. It's going to happen. It's going to happen more and more and more. Be aware of it. I'm a dinosaur, and unfortunately, that's the way the economic situation is going to lead it. What's that mean? It means very few physicians are going to go into primary care. Only those who are truly dedicated to it. Every physician is going to be a specialist because, I mean, not only are the big bucks there now, but it'll be even more so in the future. But that's, the other trend now is urgent care centers, and worse than that, urgent care centers, if you want an antibiotic, go to an urgent care center with a sore throat or a cold, and they're guaranteed to give you an antibiotic. If you really want an antibiotic and get treated, you go to, fortunately there are not too many in New York State right now, but you go to a Walgreens or a Walmart somewhere out on the coast, and you're in the middle of there, it's going to be a kiosk with some nurse practitioner or some kind of a physician's assistant standing there asking you why you're there. Maybe they'll take you in the back and look at your throat. They're not going to do much more. And unfortunately, you walk into a drugstore and you see one of these people. Are you going to walk out without a prescription? So you have to be aware of these things and try to avoid them as they exist right now. But that's a real thing. It's very tough to say no to people. But if you're going to lose them that way, you have to face the fact that you're going to lose them. Yes?
Having a very hard time being quiet. As
Your
long as
husband's
the
got
nurse
his hands-
practitioner and or the physician's assistant are practicing within their scope of practice what they're competent to do, a nurse practitioner can do whatever the physician can do in their scope of practice.
That's right, but one of the problems is that not all the scope of practice. I mean, and listen, if you're gonna deliver my baby, that's fine.
Thank you.
I have no problem with that.
I want to see that.
I have no problem at all. But the problem is,
I'm not gonna treat ovarian cancer.
if you walk into a Walgreens and with a pain in your chest, that's
I'm
really
not
not
gonna
their
treat that
scope.
because that's not within my scope of practice.
It's
But
not
I
the
can
scope.
deliver,
If someone walks into Walgreens to give birth.
That may happen. It's a trend.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but poor nutrition leads to many diseases.
You are 100% right, and that's why, that's why I can stand here and work all day and come over here and talk at night because I am the best fed person in this room.
Also leads to obesity, which can cause many diseases as well. I read recently that the young people today, children, teenagers, are not living on good meals, but on snacks. That snacks are taking the place of good enriched meals. There are many reasons for this that you could think of yourself. We have a terrible problem of obesity in the young people today. And I'm sure that this replacing meals with snacks, slice of pizza, cookies, candy, whatever, is causing great illness in this country.
Agreed. I had to say this, this Shabbos in Shul, I looked around in the men's section and just mentally made a note of who was normal weight, overweight, or obese. And I mean, this goes by, the body mass index stuff. And I hate to say this, but my estimate was that 70% of the men in the room, maybe 80%, were either overweight or obese. That, including myself a little bit, by BMI standards. We're talking here about intelligent, religious people who are Shomer Shabbos and Shomer this and so on.
Non-stop Thanksgiving.
Shmores Nafshasa. Yes, sir. You want to say something? No. Go ahead.
There are 3 million Americans who have hepatitis C and do not know it.
That's true.
Why is that so? Especially in as much as there is a 100% cure available as of December 2013.
I am going to say something about that. There are 3 million Americans who have hepatitis C, of which 2,950,000 are never going to suffer from it. Period. They just, not everybody with hepatitis C gets cirrhosis or particular problems from it. What changed this whole business is the discovery of this new medication, which is very effective, terribly expensive, and is going to be given to people who don't need it because they ain't sick.
Because what?
They ain't sick. They have Hep C.
They have
They have relatively low titers, and a lot of them are going to get treated anyway with their low PCR titers because the doctor wants to treat them. We don't know the long-term effects of the medication. We don't know if we're waking up sleeping dogs or not, and so on. But not terribly many people have Hep C with elevated PCR titers enough to think we should treat them. But
It's expensive.
Huh?
You say they're expensive, but there are scholarships available. Especially,
I understand that.
yeah.
I'm just saying, you don't go to the doctor and ask for a Hep C study. The way to find out if you have hepatitis C, if you're healthy, is to give a pint of blood, which is a wonderful thing to do. They will check you for that and send you a letter saying go see your doctor. But you don't ask your doctor to do a routine Hep C study. If they have elevated enzymes, then the doctor may choose to do one or not, and I do. very few people I've seen show a positive with antibody for it. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask how effective this new Melafine is. This is regarding dermatology. There's a new machine called Melafine. Most dermatologists do not have it.
I am not aware of it.
And what if they find, when you have. a
Oh,
spot,
fine
let's say-
melanomas.
Yeah, if you have a spot, let's say, on your face or whatever, they always want to biopsy it. But what I wanted to know is this more, if you find someone that has this Melafine, is it accurate?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not aware of the machine at all. If the studies show that it's as good as doing 100 biopsies, dermatologists make a living by biopsying unnecessary things.
Right, that's why, and if it's on the face, why would you want to do
But
that?
which is by the caveat, do I really need this biopsy? The answer usually is no.
I have a habit of asking for hard copies of every test.
You should.
Every SMA, X-rays, even have a hard copy, even have DVDs of CT scans, you have to pay for it. My question is, what good are the results of 2 or 3 years ago? How long should I keep doing it?
That's a good question. Recently, I looked up, I couldn't get the film because it was done on film. I looked up in a patient's chart an MRI that was done 20 years ago to confirm that the patient had what we were worried about 20 years ago. I mean, so you should keep those reports, not necessarily the DVDs, you couldn't get a DVD then anyway. You should keep them forever because yourself, the doctor's not going to keep them. But you'd be surprised what was there 20 years ago that,
How about the blood tests?
Blood tests, you can take the original one you had and the second one maybe and throw out all the others in
1 year
between.
worth, 1 year worth.
Same with cardiograms. You could keep the first one, throw out all the others in between because you don't need them. Because they don't
EKGs I
change.
should keep.
Just the first one.
To see
You only want to know
variation.
if it changes. If the second one, the third one, the 10th one, the 20th one, EKGs are like fingerprints. They never change unless something happens. So
You
if
can see
they,
progression, deterioration.
then you are not, you're getting treated for whatever that is. You should be anyway. Now, again, if you have symptoms, routine checkups are going down again. Going to get, we recently got in the shul I showed this to Mark, a From magazine, a new one, and it included an advertisement saying that you can't even touch your beard, you can't even trim this much of your beard, it's not from. And it was an ad from a doctor saying, come to get your checkup, we will do, and everybody, an echocardiogram, a sonogram of your neck, a sonogram of your abdomen, a Holter monitor, and so on. That is outright thievery. Not everybody needs these things, and ask your doctor why you need any particular test. Sir.
God bless the worried well.
But if you have symptoms, if you're having trouble, if you feel something that looks funny, if you look, something feels funny, if you're getting up at night too often to go to the bathroom, if you're having cramps or belly aches, and everybody should have had a colonoscopy at 50 or older, but if you have any of those things, go to a doctor, because what do you need routinely? Mammograms, colonoscopies, or some other test for colon cancer. If you're a smoker, if you've been a smoker, you should, at certain things, you should have a CAT scan, but not frequently, and with what they call low dose. Routine cardiograms are probably not terribly valuable, but you should have one as a baseline. Yes, Mark? Wait, one more second. And some blood tests that we do routinely, but you don't go ahead and do everything under the sun because what you're doing is creating incidental illness, and you're creating, well, this test is a little off, we'll do another one. We'll do another one. The next thing you know, someone's thinking, I saw a man recently, taking a family history. A mother, she died of stroke or whatever. Father, he died after getting a needle biopsy for a lung nodule. They punctured his lung and he didn't survive it. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. That was probably an incidental finding. Yes, Marcia?
What do you concerned, I was seeing those ceiling fans and lights moving, and I went to an ophthalmologist, she goes, I'm not really sure, you don't have a detached retina, let's just pretend it didn't happen. It's happened 3 more times since I've been there. Well, would you be concerned?
I'm not concerned, but it's a neurologic problem.
Is it dangerous?
You're asking personal questions. I'll talk to you somewhere else.
Okay.
Really, I'm serious.
Ceiling fan and carousel lights.
Stuart's one, I think you want to say something about future insurance?
Well, I sort of answer questions. I don't need, I don't know what's the future of insurance. No idea.
What about single payer?
I can talk about it, but it's not,
I have I heard of a story that this older man went into, to fill out, he had, x-rays, they found a lump. The lump was biopsied, they biopsied it, they found a pea inside this guy's lung. How does that happen?
He inhaled it.
No, he inhaled it, but how do you,
It goes down your trachea and gets into your lung. I mean, it happens more commonly with peanuts than peas. And
Right.
people who, back in the old days, you see people throwing peanuts in and go like that.
People still
Well,
do
peanut
that.
puff, yeah,
Like,
right.
still do that.
That is a very risky thing to do,
Right.
because you're gonna aspirate.
Or M&M's.
This
M&M's will dissolve.
is sort of personal, I think everyone kind of heard about this, so I'm not embarrassed to say it. How do you know when to go to the doctor? It's something that's a stupid question. I remember I fell, and I didn't think anything of it, and you said I broke my wrist. I mean,
If you've got a pain that doesn't go away,
More than one.
rule of thumb.
No, seriously, 'cause I remember I thought it was nothing, and you said I broke,
Because you don't know what to look for.
I'm a doctor.
You don't know what to look for.
ask your wife.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a gold, I don't want somebody just wasn't a doctor. No, but seriously, I mean, it's just,
And you didn't get a bill for it either.
it's a joke, but it's serious. I mean, how do you know when to go? I mean, how do you just
when
tell,
you don't feel well, or when you think something.
You know your body, and you know if something's wrong, you should go.
Thank
no, it's when you
you.
fall, like, yeah, you're just gonna be sprained your hand, right? It's gonna be, and it's daily,
Okay.
it goes away,
I did this 2 years ago, and I'm not done yet.
No, I mean,
It's from kicking him probably, to go to the doctor.
I'm going back.
how would you know that, you know what, this is not
Reevaluate.
just a sprain, it's something you really should go to the doctor for?
It's one of those unanswerable problems.
You can't answer the question. I mean,
a
there are
hard
people, what about the guy who walks around with indigestion like this for 3 days, and all of a sudden he
I
drops
never
dead?
would have gone if you didn't look at it, I never would have gone.
We have another question.
Yes. What's the fund look for, and obviously we're getting older in age, when we're buying long-term care insurance? Or what should we be aware of with long-term needs?
So the biggest problem with long-term, the biggest challenge, let's say, with long-term care insurance is that you may start paying for it, but the prices are not guaranteed. They can change. They can go up over time. Now, the industry has been in flux. When long-term care policies first came out 30 years ago or so, they had no idea what the experience was going to be. So they really underpriced their policies. There's been an enormous shakeout of the industry. There are very few carriers left in New York that offer long-term care insurance, and the ones that are left are very high priced. So you have to be in that market segment already where you're ready to spend that kind of money. It is another way to invest your money, basically. That it's available for that particular purpose as time goes on. But it's the risk of long-term care insurance is that it's still not a stable commodity. You can't, unlike other types of insurance like life insurance, you can guarantee a certain period where the rate won't change. Disability insurance, guaranteed it won't change. Well, not always, but you can pretty much have a good idea that disability insurance is stable. Long-term care insurance is not so stable. Nevertheless, you pick the right product, you estimate, and you can come up with something that's stable, but just very expensive. It's going to be that way anyway. Yes.
Yes, about long-term care insurance.
Yes.
You have to be careful because you'll put it off because you don't want to spend that kind of money.
Right.
And all of a sudden you get a condition and they won't insure you at all.
Right, yeah, well, that's true of many, many insurances. And, you know, you should start, if you're inclined to, oftentimes there are employers who offer plans that are discounted. But there are fewer and fewer, even in the long-term care area. Those carriers are going away. Mark?
This time of year, we start seeing many commercials for Medicare HMOs and people signing over their HMO, their Medicare benefits to a plan. You want to speak to that for a few moments, please?
Sure. Well, this is that time of year. If you're, you know, if you feel it in the air, it's Medicare open enrollment from October 15th till December 7th. So if you are already in a Medicare plan, this is the time that you would be thinking about changing. You want to examine if there have been changes to your plan and you need to think about changing. The Medicare plans, private insurance Medicare plans, otherwise known as Part C or Medicare Advantage plans, which are a combination of the original Medicare Parts A and B plus Part D, the prescription drug plan. The three together become Part C or Medicare Advantage. Those plans, once you're in one, I haven't told you yet how you get into one, but assuming you're already in a plan, you have the opportunity during open enrollment, which is from October 15th till December 7th of every year, to change your plan. And a change would be triggered because the plan itself has changed, or you've gotten notice that the plan is changing, and you may not like the way the plan is changing. So you would want to look around for other plans that might suit you better. In the end, though, your plan, even if it has changed, even if a premium has been added to the plan, even if a deductible has been increased, you might still end up finding out after analyzing the marketplace that it's still the best plan there. And the people who create these plans and manage these plans, the major insurance companies, do have the market in mind. So if they're raising a cost, they still want to try to be competitive with the other plans. Nevertheless, each person has different needs, and each person has to evaluate it, and this is the time of year to do that normally. Otherwise, if you're first becoming eligible when you turn 65, or within 3 months before, or 3 months after turning 65, or the month you turn 65, that's considered your initial enrollment period, and that everyone has the right to join a Medicare plan, whether it's original Medicare or an Advantage plan, a Part C plan. So that, again, that's not related to open enrollment. That would happen whenever you turn 65. Or if you, otherwise, if you lose your employer coverage, that would become a qualifying event. If it's not, it's after you've turned 65. Mark, you had a question.
Quickly, how long-term is long-term insurance? My understanding is that companies are not writing, they used to write, basically lifetime policies. Now the longest long-term care policy that they write is something like 3 years. Is that?
No, you probably will. You'll see some policies. You'll see some policies. I don't do a lot of long-term care insurance these days because it is so expensive, and it's just. But you have seen recently policies that go up to 8 years. But the way a long-term care policy is structured, it's structured as a pool of money. So and they give you a monthly allotment of what they'll pay out, but sometimes they don't even necessarily follow that pattern. You have a pool of money that you're buying, not necessarily, and in fact you could spread it out over a certain amount of time, or you can condense it to a certain amount of time. There's some flexibility in the way you structure a
That's the
plan.
question, whether it's better to put that money away each year, force yourself to put away whatever it was, whatever each year,
Right.
and then use that. Because
That's the classic, and now you need a financial advisor to analyze. You really need to go, a long-term care consultant can help you with that, financial advisor can help you with that. But I want to make one other point, Janet, before, is that there is a product that is available, and you should speak to brokers about that. There are riders to life insurance policies now, which give critical illness benefits or give long-term care benefits. And those have the advantage of piggybacking on a universal life policy, basically. So there is death benefit, but you can also tap into that death benefit if you need it for long-term care coverage as well. A rider, you pay more for the rider than you would just the straight life insurance, but you do get extra long-term, it's an extra feature that, and that tends to be somewhat lower in cost than the full-blown long-term care policy. Sometimes a little more limited in the features, but not necessarily so limited that it's not useful. But it's a good way of getting into it without having to take the major risk. It's a guaranteed price. When it's locked into a life insurance policy, it won't change price. So that's it. Janet, you were gonna say?
I just wanted to say that with these long-term care policies, it's very important to read the fine print. We were paying for a long-term care policy for a couple of years, and then I read the fine print. It said that you had to pay out of pocket for the first 90 days.
Oh, yes.
By the time you pay out of pocket for 90 days, you're probably going to be eligible for Medicaid. So.
Well,
So does the long-term.
well,
care
that's very common. You have to check the numbers to make sure that may be,
And it was only good for 4 years.
depends,
The
again,
reason probably it's for 4 years because they figure under Medicaid law, under New York State law here, they can have, there's a look-back period of 5 years. So they figured during that time period, you're gonna do some financial dilly-dally and transfer funds or houses or whatever. So that's why they take it for 4 to 5 years. Nursing homes are usually about $450 to $500 a day.
And multiply that by 90 days,
And
and then
90
you're eligible
days.
for
yeah, but typically you're not gonna be in a nursing home day one. You're gonna be, typically, you're in the hospital, you're in other types of care for the first period of time that you're gonna trigger a long-term care policy. So you're gonna, for instance, Medicare gives you, not long-term care, but it gives you, up to 100 days even in a facility, a hospital facility.
You
So,
have to meet the requirements for active care.
absolutely, but typically if you did, you would have that other care
If you
first.
only need custodial care, your hospital's not gonna pay
Right.
for you, and Medicare's not gonna pay for it.
But then you weren't entitled to it anyway, so, it's not, it depends, depends,
And there's
yes.
co-insurance charges when you go into a skilled nursing facility as well. And you basically have to go
Depends on the type of
from
policy, yeah.
hospital, and there's a 3-day hospital stay.
Carl?
Okay, several questions. Thank you. Would you recommend people who are Medicare, you're using Medicare,
Yes,
would you recommend that they stay with it or try to go to different plans?
it's malpractice to give a general answer to that question. I can't
Okay,
do
next
that.
question, the 90 days. Is 90 days from the time you're not capable of doing
Two of the
forms?
five activities of daily living.
If you can still do it at home, it's part of the 90 days. It's really not out of pocket.
Yeah, Janet, they're not, the plan, there might be cases where they don't work, but generally they're designed, that waiting period is designed to keep the price reasonable and still keep the policy usable. So it's not, there could be situations that are not good, but basically it works. Howard and then one.
What do you give supplemental care insurance, like Aflac?
It's,
Those like, are they worth it, or are they basically,
let's put it this way, I advocate that type of product in our practice, and it works. It's a business-based product. Usually it's offered by a company, or it's offered by individual people through a company. It's payroll deducted, and by and large, as long as you're not overspending, more than an hour or two of your salary, an hour of your salary a week, you shouldn't go more than that.
Is
The
it worth
value,
getting?
I'm sorry?
Is it worth getting?
Yes, usually it is,
I'm covered.
usually it is. Yes,
My daughter and I had to leave now,
Oh.
but we wanted to thank these gentlemen for this really
more than an hour?
get up here, Mel.
lovely and interesting and informative lectures.
And Mel, you're going to enjoy another nice meal this Shabbos, it's clear. You're in for a good meal.
But once a month is these program, somebody's coming special.
Yes.
So, what I'm.
But you want us to do this more often.
Is it every week, or is it once a month?
Once a month.
Oh, once a month?
The next one is the, I think, November. Yes. Tuesday.
November 17th?
Yeah, it's the next day. It's once a month. On Tuesday nights, Usually the second Tuesday, but it depends on the calendar.
Oh,
You
And we
know,
have a question coming in over here. Yes.
I find it harder and harder to find a decent, even though you're paying and willing to pay, it's very hard to find decent insurance. Last year, for example, I had Aetna, and it was an individual.
Was that individual
Right,
policy?
they dropped all their-
there'll be a Marav after we're done.
I'm interested.
But they
Yes.
dropped me. I mean, so.
The market is shrinking, you know,
So
and this,
now, I wound up being eligible for Oxford, but I also have one you don't need referrals, it's a real headache.
It's rare.
Any insurance that you don't need a referral, that you just get a private policy, it doesn't seem to be anymore, because they're trying to curtail your visits to any specialist.
what, I really, it's not appropriate, and I don't even know offhand, 'cause I'm not an appointed broker on the individual marketplace, I refer people to brokers.
Doesn't you just do the marketplace?
No, I'm very familiar with it, I just chose not to be part of it, because I can't
No,
afford.
you don't sell it.
I do, but not individual insurance. I can refer you to someone who really would have to look at,
It's very few you can't even find today, because one of the brokers had told me that, she got too much flack from insurance company, it doesn't pay for her to deal with individual policies.
right, well, that's right, we can't, it's very, some people make it work, some practices make it work, they have ways of just doing enough volume that they can actually help people on the individual marketplace. But it's true, the individual marketplace is better than nothing, and New York was an awful place to get insurance as an individual until a few years ago. It's now just a bad place, but not awful. So it's gotten better, relatively speaking. But it's still not what you would get from an employer. Employer plans are stronger, and large group employer plans are even stronger than small group employer plans. And that's the small group plans. If you're in a small company, those plans are going to start looking more and more like the individual plans. Not quite, they will be better still, but not so rich. So that's the trend, unfortunately. You're not going to get, having gatekeepers, having referrals, that's what that means, is very typical. It's hard, it's impossible. It's getting more common with employer plans.
That's why they sort of.
But I have to say that I spoke with a client today who, basically you do get a referral anyway from your doctor. Your primary care physician typically but the other thing is that because more and more they're automated, recently he showed up at a doctor and he called his other doctor and they just sent it quickly digitally and the referral worked quickly. So you do have happy endings sometimes on that one. I just want to mention one other thing that was regarding being aware of what's covered and what's not covered. Because it's true for Medicare, it's true for regular pre-65 medicine or employer group medicine, that certain things are just not covered, and you have to be aware of that. Certain things are covered, of course. But, for instance, cosmetic surgery or other types of things that are voluntary, that are not...
Nobody here needs it anyway.
Not at all, but an interesting experience happens at a dermatologist. You have to be very sensitive to this. I had a recent experience, and it worked out, but when you have fetches and things you want to share with the doctor, and you show the doctor, whatever, unless those are malignant or there's some issue with it, and it's just a benign matter that's on your body, unless you want to pay for it, the insurance company's not going to pay for it. So don't say, oh yeah, take it off. Because what's going to happen is you might get a bill at the end. You got to make sure you talk to your doctor and you ask your doctor, is this something that they'll pay for?
So the doctor usually knows what's covered?
Or he'll at least know enough to question it. Yes. Yeah, I would say, I'm being very conservative, yes, he will usually know what's covered. A dermatologist will know that he can justify this as a required procedure versus a non-required procedure. But you gotta just remember to ask that question. Don't just say, I don't really like this one. Let's take her,
What
no.
about experimental procedures that are not usually covered, at least initially not covered until proven?
So what is your question?
What's that?
What's you make a comment or a question?
How would you deal with that? How would you want to deal with that? Or just ignore the procedure?
No. You have to decide what it is. A benign dermatological condition you could ignore, probably. It's benign. But if it's something else that requires experimental care, there's a whole appeal process with your insurance company. And very often your doctor can advocate for you. Your doctor really has to advocate for you. to get that procedure approved. And in Medicare, there's an appeal process. It's a fairly effective appeals process for treatments that might not be on the list, but, a doctor can put it on the list. Mel will have to say what percentage of
I was gonna
times
say,
it's successful, but.
One of the things I mentioned before was transaortic valve replacement, which was not covered by any insurance company until very recently. It was experimental for several years. It is less expensive than having your chest cut open and whatever else, but they considered it experimental and they weren't paying for it. And, but all stuff like that, a lot of chemotherapy is experimental until it's approved. A lot of other stuff. Virtual colonoscopy.
You have to try. You shouldn't ignore it. You should definitely try to go through the process of appealing and denial to see. Because anyway, I've learned that when there's a denial, many carriers expect the first denial. So don't stop. Go back to the second appeal. Don't give up on that, because many times, Mel, tell me if you agree, the second appeal is the one that counts. The first appeal, they just automatically put you off.
Yeah, your PCP spends about 3 or 4 hours getting you something that he's not getting paid for at all.
Something you mentioned before, reporting them to, addressing them, reporting them
To the State Department of Insurance. That's it, and the department, Google, New York State Department of Insurance. Very easy to do.
I'm going to ask the lady